Have you ever felt something strange about always trying to do the right thing? You try to be patient, you try to be understanding, you try to respond with kindness even when situations are difficult. And most of the time, you succeed. People might even describe you as someone who is calm, thoughtful, and dependable, but there is a quiet side of that effort that most people never see. Because behind the kindness, behind the patience, behind the effort to always respond well, there is often a silent pressure, a pressure to stay composed, a pressure to stay understanding, a pressure to stay good. And sometimes that pressure becomes heavier than you expected. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever left a situation thinking, I handled that well? But inside, you still felt emotionally tired? Not because you were angry, not because you argued, but because maintaining that calmness required more energy than people realize. Many people who try to live with integrity experience something like this. They are the ones who hold their reactions back, the ones who try to think before speaking, the ones who choose patience even when they feel frustration rising. And over time, something subtle begins to happen. Being a good person stops feeling natural. It begins to feel heavy. Not because kindness is wrong, not because patience is weakness, but because something deeper is happening inside the mind. You see, doing the right thing is often simple in principle, but emotionally, it can be complicated. Because every time you choose patience, you are managing an emotion. Every time you choose understanding, you are regulating a reaction. Every time you choose kindness, you are sometimes resisting frustration. And emotional regulation requires energy. A lot more energy than most people realize. But there is another layer to this that makes the experience even heavier. Sometimes the pressure to always be good slowly turns into something else. It turns into an expectation. An expectation that you must always respond well, always stay calm, always understand, always forgive. And when that expectation becomes part of your identity, the weight becomes invisible. You may not even realize how much pressure you are carrying, until one day, you suddenly feel tired in a way that is difficult to explain. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. So the real question becomes this: why does trying to be a good person sometimes feel so exhausting? And more importantly, how do you live with kindness and integrity without slowly draining your emotional energy? Understanding that balance is one of the most important parts of emotional maturity. And once you see it clearly, you begin to experience goodness in a completely different way. At first, choosing to be a good person feels simple. You try to treat people well. You try to respond with patience. You try to do what you believe is right. These choices often come from sincere values, from faith, from empathy, from a genuine desire to live with integrity. But something subtle can begin to happen over time. Your goodness slowly becomes part of your identity. People start to see you as the calm one, the understanding one, the one who won't react impulsively. And in many ways, that reputation feels meaningful. But it can also create a hidden expectation, an expectation that you will always stay that way. Always calm, always reasonable, always patient. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever felt like people assume you will always be the one who understands? The one who lets things go? The one who absorbs tension so the situation stays peaceful? At first, that role can feel natural. But over time, it can slowly shift from a choice into a responsibility. And when something becomes a responsibility, the emotional experience changes. Because now it no longer feels like I choose to respond with patience. It begins to feel like I must respond with patience. And that small shift can make a huge difference inside the mind. Because when patience becomes an obligation, your emotional system starts working much harder. You may begin to suppress reactions that are actually normal. Frustration, disappointment, even anger. Not because those emotions are wrong, but because expressing them might conflict with the image you feel responsible to maintain. So instead of expressing the emotion, you manage it internally, you regulate it, you contain it, you smooth it out before anyone else notices. And that emotional regulation, repeated again and again, quietly consumes mental energy. Many people who are deeply committed to being good rarely allow themselves to show emotional limits. They keep understanding, they keep accommodating, they keep forgiving. But their nervous system is still experiencing every emotional moment, even the ones they choose not to show. Over time, that creates something psychologists sometimes call emotional load. It's the accumulation of small moments where you adjusted your reaction, held your words, or absorbed tension. None of these moments seem significant on their own, but together they build weight. And the confusing part is that nothing bad appears to be happening. You are still behaving well. You are still treating people kindly. But inside, your emotional resources are slowly being used. That's why some people who are known for their kindness quietly reach a moment where they feel unexpectedly tired. Not tired of being good, but tired of carrying the emotional work that often comes with it. And this is where an important realization begins. Being a good person does not mean you must carry every emotional responsibility in every situation. In fact, emotional maturity often involves learning something deeper. Learning when goodness requires patience and when goodness requires honesty. Because integrity is not only about being kind, it is also about being truthful about your limits. And understanding those limits is the key to living with goodness without turning it into emotional weight. So the question becomes important. If trying to be a good person sometimes feels heavy, what does a healthy form of goodness actually look like? The answer is not to stop caring. It is not to become cold. And it is not to abandon kindness. The real shift is much more subtle than that. It is learning the difference between goodness and self-erasure. Many people who feel this emotional weight have quietly learned to do something without realizing it. They learn to disappear slightly in order to keep peace. They soften their opinions. They delay their boundaries. They absorb tension so others don't have to. And from the outside, this looks like kindness. But inside, it slowly creates imbalance. Because relationships were never meant to function with one person constantly adjusting themselves. True goodness does not require you to disappear. It allows you to remain present. Let me ask you something important. When was the last time you allowed yourself to respond honestly instead of perfectly? Not harshly, not aggressively, but honestly. Because honesty is one of the most overlooked forms of emotional maturity. You can be kind and still be clear. You can be compassionate and still protect your limits. You can care about people without carrying every emotional reaction that appears in a room. Learning that balance changes the experience of being a good person. Instead of constantly regulating yourself, you begin to participate in relationships more naturally. You listen, but you do not absorb everything. You care, but you do not carry everything. You forgive, but you do not ignore what affects you. And something interesting begins to happen when you live this way. your kindness becomes lighter, not because you care less, but because it is no longer supported by constant emotional strain. It becomes something you offer freely, not something you feel obligated to maintain. Many people who struggle with this believe that if they stop trying so hard to be good, something important will be lost. But in reality, the opposite often happens. When goodness becomes balanced with honesty, it becomes more authentic, more stable, more sustainable. You are no longer performing patience, you are living with integrity, and integrity is far less exhausting than perfection. So if you have ever felt that strange emotional weight that comes from always trying to do the right thing, it may not mean that goodness is the problem. It may simply mean that your goodness has been carrying more responsibility than it was meant to. And once you allow kindness and honesty to exist together, the weight begins to lift. If this reflection helped you understand something about your own emotional patterns, this space exists for conversations exactly like this. Quiet reflections, honest questions, and deeper clarity about the inner life. Subscribe to the Inner Formation if you want to continue exploring emotional maturity, faith, and psychological understanding. Because real growth rarely happens through pressure, it happens through awareness. And awareness always begins within. If this reflection spoke to something inside you, remember this: you are not alone in what you carry. Many people walk through life quietly holding more than others can see. Pressure, responsibility, expectations. But faith was never meant to make life heavier. Faith was meant to remind you that you do not have to carry everything alone. So take a slow breath, allow your mind to rest for a moment, and remember that peace does not begin when life becomes perfect. Peace begins when the heart learns to trust. If this message helped you today, subscribe to this channel for more reflections on emotional clarity through faith. And if you feel comfortable, share in the comments what this season of your life has been teaching you. Sometimes the most powerful step toward healing is simply knowing you are not walking alone.